Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Podcast Boys. I am one of your co-hosts, Connor Nielsen, and joining me, as always, on his very own channel, it's the Comics Kid 2099. How are you doing, Comics Kid?
Sergeant Nielsen, Sergeant Connor Nielsen. Are you there? Yes. I'm doing great, Connor. How are you?
I am putting all of my effort into sounding like I am not sick and I don't have a sore throat. But other than that, I'm actually doing pretty well. A little sinus cold notwithstanding. I'm doing well.
Yes, Connor is going above and beyond for the podcast. He's risking life and limb for us. We give everyone give him a hand. As I may have tipped my hand a little bit in my very idiotic joke just a second ago, we are talking about the Manchurian Candidate from 2004. This movie stars some people and is directed by someone. Directed by Jonathan Demme, and it stars just a whole bunch of people. This is the second time that I've watched this, Connor, and I was still surprised how many hey, it's that guys are in this movie. The late the guy who was in Blue Velvet,
Dean Stockwell.
Dean Stockwell, yes, he passed away recently as of this recording. He has a couple cameos in this, and I had completely forgotten that. But this is the story of a soldier who has uncovered a sinister plot among the U.S. government, and maybe that's even too much of a spoiler. I'm trying to keep it relatively spoiler-free, and then this is a spoiler podcast, but if anybody has not seen this movie and they want to continue, there will be deeper spoilers ahead. But this is a remake of a movie from the 60s starring Angela Lansbury. I have not seen that movie, but Connor, you have. You've seen both of these. So now that I've done just a very brief plot synopsis, you had never seen either of these before, right?
No, I had not.
And what did you think?
We are going to be specifically talking about the 2004 remake. You were really good. It's Jonathan Demme. That's the director. He is most famous for giving us The Silence of the Lambs. There was cameos from 3 side characters in that movie. In this movie, you got Denzel Washington in here, and you have Leah Schreiber, and amongst, like you said, a lot of other people. Meryl Streep probably most recognizably amongst the secondary cast. But I am going to try to not make a lot of comparisons to the 1962 film starring Frank Sinatra and Janet Leigh and Angela Lansbury, but it's going to be a little hard for me not to compare it a little bit, because I don't think this is a bad movie. I would say it's pretty slickly made. It's effective. If this was a new release movie and it's playing at the movie theater, I would probably, give it a recommendation, maybe a matinee recommendation. I mean, yeah, it's got Denzel Washington, so even if every other actor was bad, it has Denzel Washington in it. But every other actor is not bad. You have Leah Schreiber and a lot of other great actors, and it's solidly made. It's just not a very good remake, I would say. I just think that the original is just a lot better in almost every way, except for one detail, one plot element, or one character, I should say. I would take the original over this remake any day of the week, but I still admired it. I like it. I think it makes some smart updates to that original movie, specifically the post 9/11 sort of commentary and kind of exploring that political American landscape through this sort of conspiracy thriller angle. It's different than it was in the early 60s. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But I would say the biggest problem I had is I thought the first half tries way too hard. It was just I don't know. It felt like it was trying to. It felt kind of silly as far as how over the top it was going. But I thought the second half was much better. But I don't know. I'm more curious to hear you talk about this movie. What did you think about this movie, Comics Kid?
I liked it. Now, keep in mind, I haven't seen the one with Frank Sinatra, but I saw this for the first time maybe half a year ago, maybe a little more than that. I don't know. And I liked it then, and I wasn't sure if I was going to like it as much this time, but I still really liked it. I think political thriller, conspiracy thriller. I think you said that. That's the best way to describe it. But like, there are times where I was like, this is really just a straight up horror movie. Like the parts where we're getting to see the nightmares, and like, especially when we're finally getting to see what really happened in Kuwait, like that just straight up is a horror film, in my opinion. And then like, there are aspects where it's like, if you took this just like 1 millimeter further, it would be a sci-fi film. Like the microchips that are implanted in their brains, and they're being used to like control human beings and send them on these sinister missions to assassinate people. Like that could have been like, and I'm sure it was like the plot of an episode of Smallville, like, but like using Kryptonian, super science or something like that. I feel like this movie is kind of dancing the lines between genres and doing it in a pretty smart way, I think. But by and large, I think you're right. Political thriller. And it's weird. That's normally not something I'm into. I guess I kind of have a reputation for not really getting air quotes political on this channel. I think that's mostly because I don't care about other people's political views, and likewise, I can't imagine that anyone cares about mine, so I just don't get into it for that reason. But this movie isn't necessarily about, like, us versus them necessarily. It's not like, left versus right or whatever, and if you think one way, you're going to hate this movie. If you think the other, you're going to, oh, man, this movie really, it predicted the future. It's mostly just about, here's a guy who is caught in this gigantic thing, and it doesn't matter which side of the political spectrum Jon Voight or Meryl Streep are on. This is a thing that's happening, and he's just trying to put an end to it. And so it could just as easily have been, Liev Schreiber is trying to ascend in the private sector, and like he's, he wants to be the new top shareholder of Walmart or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like, it didn't have to be politics. And so in that way, I think it's interesting that it is a political thriller, but it's not about the politics, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. That was, I think, the most interesting distinction. I guess I could get into some comparison time. The basic premise of both of these movies is the same. And they waste no time in telling you exactly what's going on in the original. Like, they tell you straight up, this is about like hypnosis and sleeper agents, like right off the bat. And a lot of this movie, like specifically the first half, first 2/3, is Denzel Washington trying to unravel a conspiracy and trying to get to the bottom of what's really going on. And so that was like just structurally kind of interesting to me. And in the original movie, the Jon Voight character is on the opposite aisle of the Meryl Streep character. And the Liev Schreiber character is not a politician. He is a soldier who wins the Medal of Honor, but his stepfather is the politician, and his mother is actually running things from behind the scenes and trying to get his stepfather elected, and him getting the Medal of Honor is like a good like image for like their whole family looking like the model American family. And so it's just kind of interesting how like some characters are just combined, how some characters are just not in this, or some characters have been added, some characters have been expanded upon. Like, there's a character in this movie played by Jeffrey Wright, who is in the original movie, but for like 2 scenes, and then he's just not in the movie anymore. And it's a little confusing why they even bothered including that character in the original. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought, like, when you're talking about like the kind of politics angle, I would actually say this movie, for a post 9/11 movie, you would think it would be a lot more overtly political. I think the 60s movie is actually more about politics, because this movie's aim is more at like political lobbying and money in politics and how corporations control elections. And the original movie is more just like about communism and Red Scare and McCarthyism and stuff like that. Which I think, as far as like political parties, it's more overt in that way. And in this one, you're right. Like, financial corruption isn't exclusive to politics. And this is more about like that financial corruption.
And I think I will say this, because a lot of people say like, keep politics out of my comic books. I don't want no politics in my comic books. And like, well, politics have always been there. Like, the X-Men since the 1970s have been about an oppressed minority who's, trying to fight back against persecution. And so it's always been there. It's just masked behind something else. Like the Invasion of the Body Snatchers, pick your version of that movie, is always about something. The 1970s one is kind of about like, them sneaking in and taking over and, subverting our minds. And like, it's there. It's just in the movie, it's an alien instead of whatever enemy nation it is at the minute. And so like, I think like you can do it. But I like it when there's a little bit more subtlety, and then I feel like it can age a little better. If this movie had chosen to be like, hey, 9/11 just happened a couple years ago, so let's go full force. We're gonna like, Meryl Streep's character would have felt very natural for her to be like yelling at, like she does kind of say like we are this close to having like a nuclear bomb dropped on our country, and like you could have gone further with that. You could have had her be like the hard right leaning, like the Muslims are coming for us and we have to do something to stop them. And I feel like if they had done that, then this movie would have felt much older. And I'm glad they didn't, because now it kind of feels like it could have happened 5 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
other than actors being, at a certain age, I like that it feels kind of timeless in that regard.
And I would say that the whole like kind of money in politics angle does make it feel 10 years ahead of its time. I feel like the 2016 election, a lot of people really responded to, I know, Bernie Sanders' political campaign, because that's what he was all about, was getting money out of politics. That was kind of like his platform. And that's 2016, and this is 2004. Like, you would think this would be about homegrown terrorism, and it kind of is, but it's more about like terrorism as a tool of like an insular group, right? And it's like a kind of an in-group that is publicly observed, but this in-group does have its own little dynamic where they are trying to like get ahead, and they do that by killing. But it's just sort of interesting how like this isn't about like the Patriot Act or surveillance and all that other stuff.
It's there though, like, especially in the last third of the movie, like Denzel, like everywhere he looks, like there's cameras watching him, and we see pictures being taken of him, and so like it's there, but it's not as in your face about it as it could be.
But yeah, and that feels like, I don't know, that like to me, like right now, like you could put that in a movie like right now, and I would just say, oh, they're using cameras to keep an eye on somebody who's suspicious, and that's maybe a holdover from post 9/11 like Patriot Act legislation, but I don't know, it's not something that I'm thinking about as much. And like, you're right, it is pretty subtle considering the time it came out in, and I think that does make this age a lot more gracefully. I do think though that where it hasn't aged as gracefully is what you were kind of talking about, more of like the genre stuff, and I think this is going to be where like we disagree the most on, because the stuff with like the Jeffrey Wright character was just kind of silly to me. It felt really I don't know, like maybe it's I grew up when I did, but like I saw a lot of stuff that looked like this, where Denzel Washington goes to his motel room and there's like drawings all over the wall and like scary notebook drawings, and it looks to me kind of like what I would expect to see on like CSI or something.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels a little like, okay, you didn't have to go that far with it. You can send the message that the implanted dreams and the hypnosis has affected Jeffrey Wright in a very severe way, without having to make it this overt. That to me made it feel a little silly. But I understand maybe why they went in this direction with it. This is the guy who made The Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like about Silence of the Lambs is how like trashy it gets at the end. Like when they go into Buffalo Bill's basement, it is like a 70s exploitation movie, and I love that. But I think what that movie did smartly that this movie doesn't do is that movie, Silence of the Lambs, the longer you spend time with Buffalo Bill, the trashier and trashier it gets. And so it kind of eases you into that aesthetic, and it kind of juxtaposes that with this sort of elegance and like operatic theatricality of Hannibal Lecter. And those are your two serial killers. And then in this movie, though, like it's kind of right out the bat is like, oh my gosh, is it Jeffrey Wright crazy? And I don't know, that didn't work for me.
Yeah, that's fair. I wasn't really thinking about that, but yeah, before you even said anything, when you mentioned hotel room, I was thinking serial killer room, like in the TV series Heroes, like when you first see Sylar's apartment, it's like a big map on the wall, and it's like, oh, he's hunting them down, and yeah, like I think Jeffrey Wright in his performance, I don't think he's bad, but maybe he felt like he needed to scale it up as hard as he did because he's only in a couple of scenes. Like he's in the very beginning where they're in Kuwait and he's sharing like a 3x3 tank with like 12 other actors. And so he doesn't get a chance to really shine there. And then we get to see him talking to Denzel, and that's really it. And then there's like on TV when Raymond Shaw has been elected vice president, or he's going to be the vice presidential running mate to the other guy. Then they show a clip of Jeffrey Wright before he goes really crazy, and that's about all he gets. And so I guess he wants. It's like, what? I don't want to say that he's this sloppy of an actor, but maybe he's thinking, I'm not going to get a chance to really like show that my character, I'm only getting a limited amount of time to do this. So I have to really amp it up to show what they're wanting me to show in such a short amount of time.
Yeah, I think it is largely, he probably saw the set that was his hotel room and he's like, oh, that's how big I have to go. And I think a lot of it does come down to like specifically that the Jeffrey Wright is in the opening sequence. Well, okay, I say opening sequence, but like we have it opens up with a scene in Kuwait in 1991, and then it jumps to the present day where Denzel Washington is talking at like a Boy Scout like meeting, and then Jeffrey Wright approaches him there. So it's more or less like the opening scene after a prologue, and that's like his one scene he really gets, and it's like the camera's just like right in his face, and so like every detail of his kind of like crazy man act is like really magnified by it, and I think it does sort of make him look a little bad, but I think it's more to do with like the director and what he's being asked to do than it is like on Jeffrey Wright's hands, because I've seen Jeffrey Wright in plenty of other stuff, and he's a great actor. So
yeah. This, we touched on it earlier, but we have, your main characters. You got Denzel, Liev Schreiber, Meryl Streep. I would say John Voight is almost a main character. But then Anthony Mackie, the Falcon, is here. He talks in that opening scene in a tank, but I don't think he actually has any like significant dialogue. But when you're watching the movie and you see his name, you're like, wait, what? And like, it's just, to me, I'm like Dean Stockwell is in it. Buffalo Bill is in it. Who I always, when I see him, I think Lieutenant Stottlemyre or Captain Stottlemyre from the TV series Monk. But he's here. Miguel Ferrer. I did tell you, he doesn't have a whole lot to do, but I like what Miguel Ferrer is doing. I really like the last scene of the movie with Miguel. But there's a whole lot of like, hey, it's that guy. And I don't know, it just kind of makes me smile. What's her face from Godzilla Kingdom of Monsters? She plays John Voight's daughter.
Yeah, I've never seen Vera Farmiga this young before. It was like, so she looks just like her sister.
Her
sister's
yes.
like 20 years younger than her, so it's like basically seeing Vera Farmiga's younger sister acting in a movie 20 years ago.
Yeah. Anyway, I always get a kick out of that when I see like it's a whole lot of actors that Liev Schreiber's half brother is in this, and I know him from the TV series American Gods. I think that's him. He's the Russian leprechaun, I think. But yeah. So anyway, that's always kind of fun. Did you want to get any more comparisons between this and the 60s movie?
Well, I wanted to quickly say that there are a few other fun actors before we jump off that. Did you notice Roger Corman in the movie?
No, I didn't. I know he was in Silence of the Lambs. I didn't know. Hold on. Was he one of the Manchurian people?
No. He's one of the people who works with Meryl Streep. He has the white hair and the big glasses.
Okay, yeah.
He's in The Silence of the Lambs as well. I think he's just friends with Jonathan Demme. And that one guy from The Silence of the Lambs who's like cross-eyed is in this movie as well. And yeah, Buffalo Bill is there in a couple of scenes. So yeah, no, there's a lot of really fun casting. And I could have sworn that the South African doctor man was I thought that was Tim Roth at first, but then as that scene progressed, I realized, oh, that's not Tim Roth. So,
When I first heard, because you first hear the voice before you see him, and I was thinking, I don't remember Malcolm McDowell being in this movie. And I was like, okay, that's not Malcolm McDowell. And then from a distance, I thought, oh, is this just a reuniting of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier? Is this Baron Zemo? But and then it was like, oh no, that's not him. Yeah, I didn't recognize that actor.
Yeah, so was Dean Stockwell just in pictures in this movie?
No, he was at one point, Meryl Streep, she takes Liev Schreiber and she says, hey, here's some, people you need to rub elbows with. And he's one of those three. And Liev Schreiber says, like, how's business?
Okay. He's one of those guys. Gotcha.
Yeah. And then at the very end, when on TV, when it says, like, we think maybe the Manchurian organization was behind this, Dean Stockwell is in that group. And one of the guys, like, turns off the TV. Dean Stockwell was in that room.
Okay. So he probably had, like, really short hair.
Yes. Probably shorter than it did in Blue Velvet, I'd say.
Yeah, I just in my head, whenever I see Dean Stockwell, he's in Quantum Leap, Blue Velvet, and Dune, and he just has big 80s hair.
Yeah.
And
or if he's in Dune, also the eyebrows.
Yes, the gigantic eyebrows.
Wouldn't it be great if in this movie, if he was just in his costume from Dune with no explanation at all?
He just has like a diamond on his forehead, and he's just like walking around. Yeah, so I guess as far as like comparisons go, it's interesting. Okay, this podcast might sound like a really all over the place for people who have not watched this movie. But it's on Amazon Prime. Give it a watch. But so the way a lot of this is set up is in the original, it takes place in the early to mid 50s, and it's in the Korean War era. That's when it takes place, and the movie was made when the Vietnam conflict was really heating up. So what you had was it takes place in Korea, and the Cold War communist backdrop is really what's going on. And you have the event where all of this troop of soldiers, they got taken to a place where they were experimented on, and then they come back home, and one of them is awarded a Medal of Honor. And that man is the stepson of a congressman or a senator, and his mother is this really kind of controlling woman. And he had a romance with the daughter of one of his stepfather's political rivals, who's on the other side of the aisle. And that romance is actually a big part of the movie. Like, you get a whole flashback to that summer that's alluded to in this movie. And that character in this movie is played by Vera Farmiga, and she has like 2 scenes in this movie, and then she's just not in it anymore. And that was like the biggest surprise to me, was that. But also Janet Leigh from Psycho was in the original, and she runs into Frank Sinatra. So Frank Sinatra has the Denzel Washington role. And what's interesting about that is that the original, it's not really about Frank Sinatra. It's really a dual protagonist role where it's about a lot of characters, and then it becomes about 2 characters. And Frank Sinatra doesn't really take over that movie, but this movie is a Denzel Washington vehicle first and foremost. And so that's really kind of the main difference. And it does feel more like a traditional political thriller, just because it is primarily about the Denzel Washington character. And that first movie is largely about just these characters being back in America and exploring this, the hypnosis thing and the sleeper agent. I kind of read it as this metaphor for, on top of just like communists, communism or whatever, you also had this element of like post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's alluded to in this movie as well. But a lot of that first movie is the characters struggling with being back home after the war. Which was interesting as that movie. But with this, it's just sort of interesting how much more active in politics the Liev Schreiber character is, and how little of a friendship there really is between the Liev Schreiber character and the Denzel Washington character, because this movie isn't taking place right after the event in the wartime. This is taking place 13 years after the event in the war. So Liev Schreiber got the Medal of Honor, but that was a long time ago. In the original one, the man who looks who is not Frank Sinatra, let me look up that cast, Lawrence Harvey, who looks just like Jason Isaacs, it should say, who I should say. But Lawrence Harvey and Frank Sinatra sort of develop a friendship because they served together and they both are having these recurring dreams. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. And there's like some fun references in this movie to the original, where you have on video Jeffrey Wright talking about how Shaw is the kindest, most noble, most amazing man he's ever known in his life. Mm-hmm. That's like a thing that all of the characters in the conspiracy remember from their dream, and it's like part of their conditioning. And also, like in this movie, the trigger word is just like their name said a few times with, it's just their name. It's their last name, their first name, last name, first, middle, last name, right? It's in that order. And that's like their trigger word. In the original, he gets a phone call, and the only real sleeper agent is not Jason Isaacs. Okay. And so the twist in this movie is that what's his face? Denzel Washington becomes a sniper. In the original, Lawrence Harvey is just this like the guy who is like doing, and he does a lot more killing in the original. He is like getting activated all over the place, but his activation is he is called and he is told to play solitaire, and he will play solitaire until he gets to a Queen of Diamonds, and the Queen of Diamonds is sort of his activation, and they do a lot with that. And particularly like the Vera Farmiga character in this movie, who has a lot more screen time than the other one, that actress was Leslie Parrish, and she is like also she's not conditioned, but she's like a part of this web where she comes back, and the romance between Lawrence Harvey and her becomes a lot more central to the middle of the movie. I don't know, it's just kind of interesting, but I don't want to spend too much time talking about the original.
No, that's kind of, I was really hoping that you would have time to watch the original, because I didn't have access to that, and so I was curious if it held up. I have heard people say that Frank Sinatra, he may have been a heck of a singer, but I've heard people say he wasn't very good at acting. I like, the original The Lady Killers movie, or Robin in the Seven Hoods. Like, I've heard that he was just kind of wooden in his acting. I've never seen a movie that he was in, I don't think. But so I'm kind of pleasantly surprised to hear that you really liked the 60s one. I don't want to say that I dislike movies from the 60s, but a lot of times movies from that era are paced a lot slower, and this will make me sound really impatient, but a lot of times I'm just like, let's get moving, like, move a little faster. I mean, I guess that does make me sound impatient, but hearing you speak so fondly of it does make me want to check it out.
And I will say this movie is paced very well. It's very fast paced, but it should be said, the original and this movie are both like virtually the exact same length. But they just do drastically different things with their time, and like how they allocate their time is also different, where the first one is slower paced, but it is also more of like a character study, because this movie is more about Denzel Washington uncovering the mystery. I suppose a good comparison between these movies would actually be to compare it to an episode of The Twilight Zone. There's an episode of the original Twilight Zone that is widely regarded as one of like the top 5 or top 10 best episodes of that show, and it's called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. Have you heard of this episode?
It's not the one with William Shatner, is it?
No.
Okay. No, sorry. There's one with William Shatner in a plane, and there's a gremlin. That's I thought maybe that was what you were gonna talk about.
No. But although that is an episode that's been remade several times. No, the original The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street is about a town that where I'm trying to, if I remember it correctly, like the power goes out and like things are being weird, and then everyone thinks that aliens are being invaded, or they start like turning on each other, and there's like paranoia, and the neighbors stop trusting each other. And it's been years and years since I've seen that episode, but a lot of people love that episode. And then the twist ending is that aliens are messing with them, but the aliens were messing with Maple Street to see if they would be friendly to newcomers to Earth. And they're saying that like, well, these people can't even trust themselves. Like, why would they trust us if we came to visit? And so that's sort of the twist at the end.
So it's like a more thought-provoking version of 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Yeah, I 10 Cloverfield Lane's a lot more insular and one location-y, but it's cool though. It's a fun episode, and a lot of people. It's largely about communism and Red Scare and neighbors turning on each other and all that. And then they remade it in the mid 2000s when they did the reboot of The Twilight Zone with Forrest Whitaker, and boy howdy is that remake bad. Where that one's all about oh no, something's happening. Things are afoot. We don't know what's going on. So then they all suspect each other of being terrorists because it's post 9/11. And the twist at the end is that the U.S. government is doing these wacky experiments on their own people and saying, wow, people sure think a lot of other people are terrorists, don't they? And that's the ending of that episode. The
real aliens are the ones we made along the way.
Precisely, Comics Kid. And that's I don't know, like the Manchurian Candidate films, I think are, better. I think this remake is better than the remake of The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. But I don't know. It was just something I was reminded of because both of the originals are commenting on the political climate of the time in which they were released. And the remakes are updates where they are kind of observing the difference in landscape politically between the 50s and 60s and the 2000s.
Yeah. Well, hearing you talk about it, I don't know when I will get a chance to, but I am going to want to seek out the original. I'm glad that you liked it as much as you did. So was there any particular direction you wanted to go with this movie, the 2004 one?
Yes. And this will be the last comment I make about the original, because this is the one aspect that the original is really bad at that the new movie really improves on. And that is the character in this movie played by, I gotta look it up. In the original, she's played by Janet Leigh from Psycho, and in this movie, she's played by Kimberly Elise.
Yes, yeah.
So in the original, that character is a horribly written character. She sees Frank Sinatra on the train and is just like, I really like you and I feel bad for you because you're having a hard time lighting your cigarette and you clearly look like you're having a hard time. Here, come on over to my house. Oh, by the way, I was engaged. I called things off because I just like you a lot, Frank Sinatra. And it's like, it's literally, that's what's happening. And then in this movie, it starts out like that. And I was thinking, oh no, are we seriously doing the exact same thing with this poor character? Like, oh, this feels so antiquated and out of touch in 2004. Mm-hmm. And then they do what they should have done in the original. And she's actually an FBI agent who's been tasked with following the Denzel Washington character, Ben Marco. So I just thought that was a change that was much, much better.
Yeah, and you know what I like about her introduction in the 2004 movie is she is like smiling at him on the train, and he's already like out of it a little bit because he's been having these dreams. He tried talking to the military doctors, and they don't want to listen to him, and they're saying like, just go back to taking your medicine, leave Sergeant Shaw alone. And then he's on the train, he just had another dream, and then she's like, this stranger he doesn't know comes up and says, hey, I ring up your groceries, you buy this thing every time. And like, let's be honest, anyone who like, I can't remember the last person who rang me up for groceries. If I was out in public somewhere and somebody went up to me and said, I saw you at Walmart a couple weeks ago, remember me? I'd be a little wary. And Denzel plays it like he's a little wary. I don't know how Frank Sinatra plays it in the original version, but in this, like, she is like, hey, stranger, you want to come to my house? Like, I can give you a ride. Like, like what you were saying, but he is playing it like he's like, okay. Sure, I guess, and he does go there, but it's not like he thinks this is normal, if that makes sense. Like, he's a little bit skeptical of it.
I would also say, though, that it takes him too long to be suspicious of her because he's crashing at her. So they're on a train to conveniently the same location where he's like, I got to find out what's going on with this conspiracy. They got stuff in the water that are turning the frogs gay. He's like just going nuts. And then she says, well, I'm conveniently staying in the exact same place, even though I'm a grocery clerk, cover. But like, I'm a grocery clerk and we can crash at my cousin's who lives up here. I guess I just am not needed at my job for the next however long you will be in New York as well, or Washington, or wherever they are, Mr. Denzel Washington. So why don't we stay at my cousin's apartment? And then they stay at this cousin's apartment. And then Denzel's like, well, where's your cousin? She says, oh, she's on tour with the Dream Girls. And he says, okay.
Yeah.
And somehow he just kind of buys all of that, and they're like crashing at this supposed cousin's apartment for like weeks. And
is it that long? I don't
know.
Okay.
Maybe I'm getting it mixed up with the original, because the original does take place like weeks will pass between scenes. So maybe I'm mixing them up, but it's like a few days, and she's like not going to work and conveniently staying exactly where he's staying. And then it's not until he sees like the recording light of a camera behind a vent that he starts becoming suspicious.
I do think maybe you're right. I do think maybe it would have been better if he had like found that camera or something much earlier, but then he didn't let it be known that he suspected anything. Like he played it cool, and then later he like shows his hand like, hey, I know that you've been watching me. What's going on? That probably would have been better. And once you mentioned that how long he's been there, I was thinking, because like when you just pay attention to the Denzel plot, it seems like this takes place over like 3 or 4 days. But when you are paying attention to like the Meryl Streep Liev Schreiber plot, it has to be longer than that, because at the beginning of the movie, they don't even have a vice presidential candidate yet. But by the end of the movie, the presidential race has been won. So it has to have been a long time, like months, right? But I usually, try my very best to keep my head far away from political discussion and debate, because I would go sick with stupidity if I listened to everything. But I don't know how long it is between like, okay, here is the actual like people who are going to be running for president and vice president on both sides, and then here's the presidential election. At least a couple months, though. So that's a weird thing where it's like, it's kind of like I heard somebody complain about The Empire Strikes Back, how if you watch the Luke scenes, you get the feeling that Luke has been on Dagobah for like a really long time, and you watch the Han and Leia scenes, and it doesn't seem like they've been at Cloud City that long. And it's kind of like that here, where like watching the movie, I wasn't thinking about it, and then you said something about how long he was at her apartment, and I started to think about it like, wait a minute, how long was he there? So yeah, that's a weird thing that maybe I'm just really nitpicking here, but that's
no,
worth
I don't think you are. In Star Wars, though, you can say with space there's the law of relativity, but that's my get out of jail free card.
There you go. In Manchurian Candidate, by the time Denzel gets to where he's going on a train, he gets there and like the presidential election was won like 40 years ago, and Liev Schreiber has his own kid who's also played by Liev Schreiber. It's like the movie Ice Pirates. Anyway, I never ever thought I would reference Ice Pirates in one of our Podcast Boys podcasts. I really like Denzel in this movie. I should point out, I don't know if I've ever seen that many Denzel Washington movies. I think I've seen Remember the Titans, and I've seen this, and I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's just like escaping my mind that I haven't seen. But he's really good. I think he does a really good job playing like he's playing kind of charming and handsome's not the right word, but like he's a very together guy. Like when he's giving that speech to the Boy Scouts, you're like, hey, who's this good looking guy? Like he's probably like a superstar. He's got a hot wife and a nice car. And then he goes to get groceries, and it's like, oh, he's buying medicine like because he's having trouble sleeping, to keep himself awake. And then like he goes to his apartment, and his apartment is just kind of, it's not as bad as Jeffrey Wright's apartment, but it's kind of a mess. And then throughout the movie, it's like he gets worse and worse, and it's like, oh, now he's playing like really unhinged. And I think he does a really good job playing both versions of this same character.
I would agree. I think that Denzel is one of those actors where I too have not watched a lot of the movies he's been in. I've seen Glory.
I have seen that too, but I was in high school and I didn't remember that he was in that. So sorry, Denzel. Is that the one with Matthew Broderick?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I have seen that. I forgot that Denzel was in that. I apologize.
He was very young.
He was in Much Ado About Nothing. I forgot about that with Kate Beckinsale and Kenneth Branagh and a whole bunch of what's his name? John Wick. I forgot.
Keanu Reeves.
Yeah.
But Denzel was one of those actors where he really blew up in the 90s and 2000s, and that was when I was a little kid. And so when I finally like grew up, and like growing up, I was always aware of him as like that guy who was in all the action movies, because throughout the 2000s, like he was in this, but he was also in just a ton of movies that were directed by Tony Scott, who just made a lot of action movies. And in the 90s, he was in Malcolm X and Crimson Tide, Philadelphia, just a lot of movies. And so I really started watching movies regularly in the year 2014. And by that point, Denzel had already like kind of made it. And since 2014, he has only been in like 7 or 8 movies. And so like I see him in stuff every once in a while, but like his star has already been like established, and he's getting older, and he doesn't need to be like the movie star and everything anymore. And so like, I don't know, like Denzel as an actor is one of those people where as long as I've been alive, or at least as long as I've been aware of movies and acting and all that, I feel like I've grown up in that post Denzel world where you ask people like my dad's age and a little bit younger, and people who are like 10, 15 years older than I am, and they will say Denzel's like their favorite actor, because I think he like revolutionized acting, where like he had his own style and his own way of doing like performance that kind of changed the game. And I kind of grew up in that time where everyone was trying to incorporate Denzel Washington into their performances. And so like, to me, like it's hard for me to like look at him as like this particularly excellent actor, but I've also never seen a bad Denzel Washington performance. So I don't know. I'm not complaining. I think he's really good in this movie. I would agree.
This is taking us off course, but did I ever tell you about when I found out that the actor who's in Tenet, that he is Denzel's son? When I found that out, I was like, out loud, I said, nuh-uh. Because I was like, he doesn't look like Denzel. Like I look at the two and I'm like, I don't see much of a family resemblance. So I was like, Washington, surely that's just like a fairly common name. Like, and because like, I don't know, sometimes when I find out 2 people are related, I'm like, oh, okay. And like, I was just kind of blown away, because when I think of Denzel, I think of him circa Remember the Titans and The Manchurian Candidate, which is movies from like a decade and a half ago. And I don't imagine that he's like actually aged. Like sometimes, whenever you see The Manchurian Candidate, you forget that in that time, like he has gotten older as well as I have. And so, and I'm getting older too. And it just kind of blew my mind, where I was like, he has a son who's old enough to be acting, who's probably as old as he was when he first started acting. Like that, I was just like, that I felt like, that meme from Saving Private Ryan, where it shows like the who is it, where it's like the person just gets really old in like a span of seconds, like on screen. I just felt like that, where just like I got really old, because I was like, Denzel has a son who's acting? What?
Yeah, and his son was a football player, like a professional football player, and then stopped being a football player and started acting. That's how long that guy's been alive. Yeah, it's just like one of those things where I don't know, like you're right. Like when I first saw John David Washington, I didn't know it was Denzel's son. And I mean, honestly, if you had to like give me, like put a gun to my head and say what contemporary actor is Denzel Washington's son, I would be more likely to say John Boyega than John David. Not to say that John David's a bad actor; he's really good. But you're right. Like I don't get the impression that he's Denzel's son. And John Boyega is British.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, isn't Denzel British? Now I may be no, showing my ignorance here, but I think he may be British. Maybe
he's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then he does really good. Like I thought maybe I saw a clip from the Norton Graham Norton show, where maybe he was just like pulling one over on Graham Norton. I don't know, and pulling one over on me, because I thought he was British. But speaking of good actors, I think Liev Schreiber is really tearing it up here.
It's crazy. Like at the top of the month, I watched through all of the Scream movies.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that Liev Schreiber was in those. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's barely in the first one, but like he's a primary character in the second one, and he's in the opening scene of 3. That should tell you what happens in the opening scene of 3. But it's okay. It's only Scream 3. Don't worry.
I haven't, as of this recording, Scream 5 has not come out yet. I will go ahead and put my foot down and say Scream 3 is the worst one. That's my...
Yeah. I don't like 2.
2 or 3 are not good. I know we're getting off track, but I think 2 is not helped because the script leaked, and so at the last minute they're like, someone else is a killer, and so like 2 is a big mess.
Yeah, but like Scream 3 also just takes 2 much better Wes Craven movies and slaps them together and calls it a day. That just takes New Nightmare. Like New Nightmare already felt like a proto Scream anyways, and that it just feels like Scream aping a New Nightmare, and it's just weird. But then it also ends in a house that has a bunch of like secret passageways and booby traps, a la The People Under the Stairs. So yeah, 2 and 3 aren't great. 4 is easily the best sequel, and they're making a 5th one without Wes Craven, which is weird. What's next? A 5th Indiana Jones movie without Steven Spielberg? But speaking of Leah Schreiber, he's like an actor that I've just been seeing a lot of lately. And I would say this is probably my favorite performance I've seen from him. I've not seen a whole lot. I've seen everyone's favorite X-Men Origins Wolverine, and I've seen the Scream movies. And I'm sure I've seen him in other stuff as well. But I think this is my favorite. He kind of does the same thing in every movie, but I think he's really well cast in this, and he's really charming, but also when he has to switch and be like a sleeper cell agent, he's pretty good.
Yeah, and you were saying that the original movie is kind of a dual protagonist thing, and I was thinking when you were saying that, like, well, this one kind of is, but you're right. For most of the movie, it is a Denzel movie, and then towards the end, like by the time Denzel has started to convince Liev Schreiber what's going on, I start to really feel bad for Liev Schreiber. Like he's, and you don't, what's great about it is you don't know when he is under the control of his mom and a Manchurian organization, and when he is just genuinely upset. Like he goes to Denzel at one point, gives him back the Medal of Honor, and he says, "I don't deserve this," and he's crying, and you think, okay, this is really him, like pouring his heart out. And then he gets a phone call and he hands it to Denzel, and that might be Denzel's character. That might be his stupidest moment in the entire movie, where he takes the phone and answers it like, "Hello." Like you like, I guess maybe he has no reason to think that at that point, does he know that Liev Schreiber's mom is in on it?
I don't think so. And also, like, I don't think, does Liev Schreiber even know that his mom's in on it?
I don't think so either. No. I guess it depends on what he is cognizant of, because she does activate him at one point and then sends him to kill John Voight. But does he know after that John Voight, like, does he know, because he tells Denzel, "I killed John Voight," I think, didn't he? Or did he just say John Voight is dead?
Or is he just saying that as a sleeper agent?
Right.
And that's the thing, is in the original, it becomes very clear that when he becomes the sleeper agent, that is like a separate personality that does remember his past, but when he is not, he doesn't remember anything. And there's that scene when you first see Liev Schreiber get activated, where you have not Tim Roth, Scientist Man, saying, "You will not remember anything after you are snapped out of this frenzy."
Mm-hmm. And so I kind of like the ambiguity there. Like sometimes in any other movie or TV show or whatever, if I'm asking a dozen questions about what is going on here, and if this thing is going on here, then what does that mean for all these other scenes? That would mean that I'm like poking holes in it like a water balloon, and I would say, like, this doesn't work. I kind of like it here. I like that we don't know about it. Like at the very end, Denzel is Manchurian candidated to he's going to assassinate Liev Schreiber's running mate so that the Manchurian organization can have control over the country through Liev Schreiber. I don't know if you ever watched any of my videos on the TV series Heroes, but Heroes season 1 really owes a lot to this movie. They were doing a very similar thing where Nathan Petrelli was being run for governor of New York, and then they were going to blow up New York, and then he was going to, they could see into the future sort of, and they were going to basically put him in the White House and they would control him. And like wow, like Manchurian Candidate does such a better job of that plot than, and I actually like Hero season 1 better than the other seasons, but I feel like if you took this movie away, I don't know if Heroes season 1 really would have any substance to it. But the at the very end, Liev Schreiber keeps looking up at where Denzel is, and he kind of nods at Denzel, like, go ahead and do it. And so at that point, okay, he is okay with what's going to happen. Because like earlier, he asks his mom, he says, does Denzel have to die? And she says, the assassin always has to die. And that's a really creepy line that she delivers pretty well. But at that very moment, it's like, oh, okay, he's okay with it. He's made his peace with all the horrible stuff that the Manchurian group is doing. And maybe he's naive enough to think, like, because he is kind of painted as like the perfect politician. Like he cares for the little man. He wants to help the people. And like even when Denzel like attacks him with a knife, he tells his mom, I want to drop the charges. Like I want to help him. He's a veteran. Like let's try and show some sympathy. And so it's like maybe he thinks, if I'm president, I can actually do the things that I'm talking about. Now, would he actually be able to do that? Or would his masters just control him and control policy through him? We don't know. But when he's okay with his running mate getting assassinated, I feel like that's where you kind of say, like, oh, he just crossed a line. Like I no longer am feeling sympathy for him. I don't know about you, but that's kind of where I was.
Yeah, sorry, you were just reminding me of another thing where they changed it a little bit. So it's called the Manchurian Candidate in the first place because the group of soldiers that is experimented on, they're taken over the Manchurian border into Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And in there, that's where they are experimented on and are sent back. And in this one, it's like the Manchurian Worldwide. It's like a capital equity financial sort of group that funds politicians, and they funded this research op. And so that's and like, so I'd say that's actually another area that I felt like the intent was a little confused where this, because there's Manchurian Worldwide, which is the company, and they funded this evil, like crazy South African doctor, and I guess they still are because he's still implanting, information. But it feels like the doctor is separate from the company. He's just funded by them. And Meryl Streep also works for this company because she's funded by them. But she also has her own goals that are independent of the company. And I guess I'm just a little confused how like the money and politics angle like works with the political assassination and like that angle of it. Okay. Because it seems like they're funding her desire to eliminate the competition, but in the original, having all of the different politicians be part of different political parties, I think made more sense, because with the mother character in that eliminating the competition, like her agenda was in line with the communist agenda. You know what I'm saying? And mm-hmm. So it's like it was mutually beneficial for the mother and the people that implanted that created the sleeper agents. With this though, I'm a little confused by like how ambiguous Manchurian Worldwide is. Like what are their goals? Are they like an American company? What are they really after besides just funding all of these different people? Because it seems like they're funding super soldiers and funding other people's like political campaigns and their agendas, and I'm confused what they're getting out of it as well.
Yeah, as far as her having different goals from the rest of the group, I took it that she has pretty much been on board with them, and they have been on board with her up until she sends her son to kill John Boy. And then they're all having a conversation where they said, you acted without consulting the rest of us. And she basically said, I did this to protect our interests. I felt like she was kind of like, up until this point, they've all been on the same page. As far as their goals, maybe I'm reading too much into it. I assumed that their goal was just generic. We want to take over America. And then if this works, and once we have America firmly in our grasp, maybe we can try expanding our operations. But like we're a global organization because we have this doctor from wherever he is. And then like, but we're mostly active in America because all of the people we see who are part of this organization are American businessmen and politicians. So I assumed that their goal was mostly just American based, but it could expand elsewhere.
Okay, because they're called Manchurian Worldwide. So I felt like the whole shadow company element was kind of undercooked. That's I guess what I would say one of my bigger complaints.
I will assume the only reason they called it Manchurian Global or Manchurian Incorporated or whatever is because the original movie is called The Manchurian Candidate.
Oh, I'm sure that is, but they call it Worldwide. Like the company is called Worldwide.
Oh, okay.
I was wondering how big that company actually goes.
Yeah, that's a good question, and the movie doesn't answer it. It didn't bother me too much that it didn't, but I can understand if you did have problems with it.
And this is another element where I'm like, I don't know how much this would have stood out to me because I just watched the original, and that's one where like the group, not the company, but like the shadow organization that had created these sleeper agents, like their agenda, they're trying to achieve their own agenda, and the mother character is also trying to achieve her own agenda. They're just kind of aligned in the sense of like who they're trying to kill to get out of the race. And in that movie, she's actually angry at the people that made her son a sleeper agent. And like after, she says, after we're done doing what we're doing here in Washington, I'm actually going to use you to get back at the people who created you, because I don't like that they made my son the sleeper agent. I just wanted a sleeper agent.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's interesting because on the one hand, the 1960s, when it sounds like they are making her she's still sinister, but she has like she loves her son, and who wouldn't? In this movie, like, boy, is Meryl Streep easy to hate in this movie. Like,
yes. Yes.
I mean, seconds after you meet her, she's already like, that girl was just not good enough for you. And, and he's like, you pushed her away, Mom. She's like, well, I just don't remember it that way, son. And it's just like, man, she's overbearing, and she like pushes herself into his room, and you're like, wow, I can't stand her. And then you find out that and so there's one scene where he gets they're like Sergeant Raymond Shaw, and they bring him into the room, and she's on the phone with him, and she's like, are you there? Hey, son, are you there? And so it makes you think, I guess, if you've seen the original movie, oh, okay, she doesn't know that he has been put into this organization, and then she does it to him. And so it's like, oh, she is willing to ruin her son's life to take control of the country. And she says, like, I'm a believer. I believe in the cause. But really, like, I've been watching a little bit of Game of Thrones lately. She reminds me of Tywin Lannister from Game of Thrones, where he claims he's all about family, but really he's just power hungry. That's very much what she is about. Like, she claims that she's doing this for a good reason, but she just wants to take over the country and, do it through her son. And so, boy, she like easily top 5 supervillains I've ever seen.
Yeah, Meryl Streep is really taking this opportunity to play the villain. It's interesting because like the mom being the villain is a twist in the original, where because her husband is the politician and he's like a big dummy, and you're like, why is this guy such an idiot? And the reveal is that he's actually just a puppet for her. She's actually controlling everything behind the scenes. And so it's like she's sort of like the unsuspecting mastermind of her own thing, the same way like a sleeper agent is unsuspecting of themselves being a puppet, right? And so like there's like some cool thematic parallels there. Mm-hmm. With this one, like Meryl Streep is like very obviously the villain from the word go, and that's not like a slight against this movie. It's just a different interpretation of the material, because both of these movies are based on a book. I have not read the book. What's interesting is that this movie's screenplay is said to be based on both the original 1962 film's screenplay and also the book. So I'm curious what elements they're taking from the book that maybe weren't adapted in that original screenplay or what. But I just kind of be curious. This is very much an updating of that material. And so, yeah, Meryl Streep is so easy to hate in this, as you said. She is pretty awful. I do want to say, though, this movie has a lot of really cool images. I thought it was pretty well directed. Particularly the part that stuck with me the most is when Leah Schreiber kills Vera Farmiga.
Mm-hmm.
where like he's holding her, like he's drowning her, and he's holding her like inches below the water, and the camera does like this reverse shot where it's like looking down at her and you're seeing her in the water, but then it like does the reverse shot where it's like her POV just inches below the water and you're seeing Leah Schreiber's face from beneath the water. It's a really cool way of shooting that scene.
Yeah, and getting back to Leaves acting, it's this thing where like he's playing like stone cold robot, like just sent to do a job, like, and like his job is just to kill John Boyd, but then she comes, and then the job becomes, well, there can't be any witnesses, and so then he kills her, and so he's playing it in between. I don't know how he did it. He's playing it in between. I'm just here to do a job. And like, this would be like painting the walls of a house. Like you have no emotion when you're painting the walls of a house. And like, he's doing that, but also killing, like, because he talks to her earlier and he's clearly upset with his mom that she drove this girl away, that he had feelings for. And then he tells her later, he says, I can't stop thinking about what could have been. And I feel bad for him because she says, like, yeah, we were kids. Like, I moved on. Like, good luck with the election. See ya. And so he's killing this woman who means a lot more to him than she did, or she means a lot more to him than he did to her. And so you can tell it's tearing him up a little bit, but also he's still in that robot mode. Like, it's really interesting how he's going between both right there, I think.
I would agree, yeah. Also, another comparison, it's interesting because in the original, the mother also drives a wedge between the two of them and kind of causes them to break up. And like the very next day after she makes them break up, he enlists in the army and goes to fight in Korea. But what's interesting in the original is that she comes back and they like get married, and then the mother orders him to kill both like her dad and her, and so like he has to like he pops them both with like a pistol and whatnot. But it's like a pretty shocking sequence where like the mom like was orchestrating everything about like she anticipated her son breaking up with her, that girl so that she could bring her back to bring up those emotions again and like have them get married. And like so and like because of the optics of how that would look, about like no one would suspect this my son being a killer because like his wife that everyone knew he was into was murdered. You know what I mean? Like, and so like it's like, wow, she's a real villain in both of these. But I was just, because this movie is more concerned with the Denzel Washington character, that kind of backstory and romance with the Leah Schreiber character isn't as central. But I still thought that the way they handled that murder sequence was pretty effective.
Yeah. Did you have anywhere else you wanted to go with this? I know we've been talking for a little bit, but I feel like if I may, I think I like this more than you. Obviously, you have a little bit to compare it to, but I won't say you hate this movie, but it sounds like you didn't like it as much as I did.
I would say that's probably a fair way of putting it. I did not dislike this movie. I would say it got better as it went along, and I liked the second half more. I think that a lot of the first half just wasn't as effective to me because you had said that like what's cool about it is like how it handles the genres, and I thought that the way it jumped genre was a little silly to me. But I don't know, like it's not bad. Like I don't know, like it's hard for me to describe. Like it's also just like acclimating to this version of the story was difficult after I just watched another version of it. So maybe get back to me in a couple of years if I give this another rewatch, with some distance between the original. I don't know. I'd be curious to know how this holds up after some time.
Yeah, I did have a question. So Denzel finds that there's a little tiny microchip in his back, and then he loses it. And then later he gets one from Liev Schreiber's back, and then he brings it to his like Russian science friend, and his Russian science friend is like, "Ooh, this is like crazy technology. It shouldn't exist." And then later we see that both Liev and Denzel are still able to be mind controlled. So my question, maybe the movie explained it and I missed it. What was the point of the microchip that got removed from both Denzel and Liev Schreiber if it wasn't for the mind control?
I don't know.
Okay.
Also, another question. Liev Schreiber gets something implanted into his brain. What was that?
Yeah, because and I feel like maybe that scene was just like well, we want to have something weird and creepy here. Like I said, kind of bordering on the horror, where it's like he goes into a hidden room that's maybe in his hotel, or maybe that's all in his head, and then like he goes in there, and then like they put this thing in there, and I feel like that's more just for atmosphere than for actual plot. And maybe like the microchip that gets removed from both of them is kind of similar, where it's like, well, we want to have some like weird sci-fi techno babble to explain how they're doing this, so we have to have this friend who says this and that. I thought it was weird how it goes from like he's talking with his friend, his Russian science friend, and it's like, okay, are you sure you want to do this? Yeah. And then the next thing you know, his head is in that girl's lap, and they're like out in the middle. Like I expected it to start playing the Full House theme song, because you're seeing people like in a yard like throwing football and stuff. And I was just like, wait, what happened? And she says like, your friend said that this would happen, that you would lose your memory like a computer rebooting. And I was like, what? And I do like the movie, but at that point I was a little confused about like, what is going on? Why, like, how much time has passed here?
I think with that, the idea was he had asked Bruno Gans to give him electroshock therapy so that he could like unlock memories, and doing that to somebody creates like memory damage and like knocks you out for a while. So I think that's why that happened, is because of the way he was able to get that. But I guess like all these are kind of tied together with a common theme, and I think that is that this movie does, like with like the little implants and the hidden memories that need to be unlocked, and like these all feel like things that need, these are like, well, like these are plot developments that work for the unraveling of a conspiracy, right? Like, ooh, what are these? This is a thread for me to pull on. But when you actually look at like the broad plot of the Manchurian Company, you wonder exactly why those are even there, though.
Yeah, I agreed. I don't really have much more to say about that. I think it's one of those. I don't want to. This is going to sound like an insult. It almost seems like they're saying like, don't think too hard about it. Like, just enjoy that this is a weird, spooky crime thriller, but don't think too much about the logistics of it. And earlier today, I wasn't thinking about the logistics. I was just thinking, man, that's a pretty fun movie. And now that you and I are talking about it, now I'm starting to see, wait a minute, if this is this, then what's that? So maybe that's a little bit of a low blow for me to say that they might be saying like, don't think too much about it.
I don't know. I think that if anything, that points to the strength of how it's like assembled. You know what I mean? Like while you were watching it, you were along for the ride. And maybe that's maybe a detriment to the screenwriter, but a positive to the director that they were able to cover that up.
Yeah. So did you have anywhere else you wanted to go with this? Because I think I am out of things to say now.
If you have not seen this movie and you have listened to this podcast, I don't know how you were able to follow along, because there's a lot of elements in this story regarding like different characters and sleeper agents and political corruption and shadow companies and all that. While you're watching the movie, it handles all of it, I think, pretty evenly and pretty effectively. It's well edited and I think pretty well paced and largely well directed as well. I think that just for myself, I had a hard time acclimating to it after watching the original, because I did really, really like the original. And if anybody is interested, while this is going up for a few more days, at Barnes & Noble, the Criterion Collection sale is 50% off everything, and the original Manchurian Candidate is in the Criterion Collection. So if you want to pick it up, it's available.
Okay. Also, I did want to quickly say, I like how at the very end, when they're covering up that Denzel killed Raymond and Meryl Streep, and then they like somehow use like early 2000s Photoshop to like Photoshop a video and put like no, it's change him to some white guy, and then like how I really like how Miguel Ferrer basically has one scene in the movie where he says, like, he gets mad at Denzel and says like, no, you will not, and like he's saying like, I don't believe you, and then at the end he believes him, and I was just like, yes, he like. Things did not go well for anybody in this movie, but at least he's covering up for Denzel. I kind of like that. But yeah.
Quick question: who was that though? Like, they explain who it was, but that wasn't a character in the movie, was it?
I don't think so, because earlier in the movie, they say there was the civilian contractor who like he vanished whenever their group got captured, and I feel like that's like a red herring for something that like didn't get followed up on. And so I was wondering, I was like, what? Maybe it would have made more sense if they were like the civilian, the civilian contractor from Kuwait. Maybe he came back and killed him for some reason, and like, you know, maybe he died in Kuwait, and maybe they're just saying that it was him. I don't know. Like, it wasn't a character in the movie. You're right. I think they were just saying like, let's just pin the blame on somebody else, and so it's not a character in the movie. But it does feel kind of weird where there's suddenly like, it's so and so who was believed to have died a year ago. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't really have much to add. I'm glad you brought up that last little detail. Our Twin Peaks connection was Miguel Ferrer doing a very Miguel Ferrer performance, stern FBI man. But, you know, he was pretty good.
Yeah. In between scenes, he's going and digging up teenagers in the Pacific Northwest. No, I'm just kidding. So, Connor, we have come to the part of the podcast where you will be telling us what we will be talking about next time. I'm very excited to hear what you have to say.
Next time, it is going to be Christmas time. Ho, ho, ho. Jingle bells and sleigh rides. Add in some terrible, like bell music over this post. Probably not, but whatever. We are going to be reining in the holiday season from a pretty competent, pretty enjoyable conspiracy thriller to Home Alone 3.
Okay. Hold on. Wait. Is this the one with Prince Stewart?
No.
Oh.
No. This is the last Home Alone film to receive a theatrical release. It is from 1997. This is the one that doesn't have Macaulay Culkin in it. This is, you know, Macaulay Culkin does the first two, and then they made a third one starring some kid. But this features Lenny Von. Oh, it does have Scarlett Johansson as a little girl. But the Twin Peaks connection is Lenny Von Dohlen, who played Harold Smith in season 2 of Twin Peaks. He was also in Fire Walk with Me. We have never used this actor before for a Twin Peaks connection, and I saw that he gave us a performance as one of the bad guys, one of the burglars in Home Alone 3. That's what we'll be talking about next time. Okay.
It's gonna be really hard for me not to see him as this weird, creepy guy, like reading poetry to a teenage girl. Saying like, Kevin Menevin, tomorrow is another day. I don't know why.
Kevin Menevin, there's always heaven. Yeah.
I don't know why he's like an old man in my head, but yeah. Okay.
He does have the voice of an elderly man, though.
Yeah. I'll be honest, I had forgotten about him until you brought him up. He was simultaneously like one of the more entertaining aspects of that era of Twin Peaks, and also like in a show that has like, you know, like weird people like cream corn disappearing and people wearing masks and like, you know, horrible stuff happening. He is one of the creepier elements of Twin Peaks. So this will be maybe very tough to watch or maybe very enjoyable. I don't know.
Well, I'm not expecting good things. Is all I'll say. This is definitely. This is a cringe pick, if you will, right? I was thinking I need to pick something for the holiday season. What are some Christmas movies? Because we've never really done a Christmas episode. What are some fun Christmas movies to watch that feature Twin Peaks actors? And I saw that Lenny Von Dohlen was in one, and I perked up, and I saw that it was Home Alone 3, and I immediately grimaced. So if anything, we can have fun sharing pain of watching this movie.
There's more Home Alone movies than I thought. I was only aware of there being 4, but there's one from 2012 called Home Alone: The Holiday Heist. I really, really want that to be the Sticky Bandits, like, rope in Kevin and say, you're part of our heist. Like, you are helping us with some heist. And so Kevin has to team up with the Sticky Bandits for whatever reason. I really want to watch that plot of that movie.
And they just released on Disney Plus Home Sweet Home Alone.
That sounds amazing, I guess. Man, Lenny Von Dohlen looks like Jack Frost from like Rise of the Guardians. Okay, this has gone on long enough. It's on Disney Plus if anyone wants to torture themselves and watch this along with us. So we'll be talking about that in a couple weeks. In the meantime, I am the Comics Kid 2099.
And I'm Connor Nielsen.
And we'll see you guys in the future. Bye.